Hey, Luke here again with you. Welcome to the next video. In this video, we're going to continue shaping the blank for our hydrofoil board. In the last video, we did our outline, our bottom, and our thickness and cleaned up our blank. So in this video, we're going to move on to doing our rails, our concave and for the sunken deck, and also for the bottom, and then final sanding and really cleaning the whole entire blank up. So like I said, first step's going to be the rails. So looking at the plans, what we'll be doing is marking out our internal rail line. So this is the line that will form the hard edge on the bottom of the board, and also this curve that we'll be creating around on the rails. So there's a couple of marks that we need to do onto the blank before we get started. This is what you'd refer to in surfboard building as your rail bands. It's a little bit different with the foil board, but I'm going to show you exactly the lines that I like to put on the board to mark out. So it basically just serves as a reference. So while we're planing, we know where those lines are, we know where we need to stop. So the very first thing we'll do is we'll just flip the board over. We'll start on the bottom. Similar to the way that we did our outline, we come in 150, 300, 600 from both the nose and the tail, and then we can plot out our marks exactly the same from the midline, just like we did for when we were drawing our rail template. And then we actually are going to use that template to mark this line again. So like I've just said, I've already started plotting these points. So we've come from the exact nose, 150, 300, you might be able to see these marks here, and 600. And referencing the dimensions, so from the tail, this is up 300, out 103, like that. This is up 150, and out 52. And you can go along and just mark all of the marks that you have on the plans. If you don't have the plans already, of course, you can download them from the link in the description. So I'll go ahead and mark all of these. And the last thing that we need to mark is just from the nose, just back 20 millimeters, and from the tail, back 70 millimeters. The next step is to trace the outline onto the blank. So using the same plans that we've already drawn, the trick here is, because this outline is slightly different from the outside outline, if you come to the 25 millimeter mark that you've drawn, so this is the tail at the tail, so we haven't spun it around, and you match the 25 millimeter mark with the 70 millimeter tail mark, like that, that works really well for now hitting these points as we go along. So what I like to do is set that at the tail, and then come to the widest point mark, which, if you remember, is sort of in the center. It's right there. So this is the widest point, which is 160 millimeters forward of center. And then just mark from here back to the tail. So now we can slide the template towards the nose. We're going to keep this right where we drew this line here. We're going to keep that on the line, so somewhere like that, and that's basically going to blend in. By shifting the template, it allows us to get the curve correct, but also change the shape of it. So we're using this as a curve, but just by shifting it, it allows to hit those points, but have the smaller outline on the underside. It's right about here, so it's call it about 20 millimeters back. If you push that across to the center mark, or to the midline, and then set this so it's going to blend in at the widest point, and then that is a pretty good line right there. So we trace that. What we've created now is taking more of the material out in the tail, which allows this slimmed out tail for earlier takeoffs and more similar to a downwinder hydrofoil board design shape on the underside of the board, so touchdowns and takeoffs. So now we'll flip the template over, and I'll do exactly the same process on the other side. So now that we have the hard edge of the rails on the bottom of the board marked out, we will start to mark those rail lines on the rails as well. So I'll be using a pencil gauge. You can also just measure down and trace a line, but a pencil gauge like this is really, really helpful. The measurement that we're going to be marking is 95 millimeters from the bottom of the board. You can see this line coming across here. This marks obviously the sort of apex of that curve all the way around the rail. So what you can do, stand it up, and then from the bottom of the board, holding the wood nice and flat on the surface, go all the way around and just mark this line. And as we get into the nose, you can see it comes off the rail, which we actually don't want. What we want to do is blend this from back there all the way to about the center of this. But I still mark this, and we'll then blend in between. While it's this side up, we actually mark the other apex. I'll show you on the plans. So you can see the curve of this. If we were to just plane a line from the 95 to that corner, you can see would take out too much material and would actually ruin our rail. And so that straight line is actually more like that. And so it's, if I hold the corner of the ruler, it's about there is the apex of this section in between that 95 and the bottom. And so that is also 95 millimeters from the deck. So the way I've designed it is that if we draw another 95 millimeter from the deck mark, it'll show us where we can run our planer straight to and then start to curve it around. And so we use the same pencil measurement from the deck and we run that line again. And so now you can see these are two good reference points for shaping it. As we're shaping it, you can sort of see where we're going to cross that line, and we can draw a center line in the middle of it in a moment. Okay, so flip it over and do exactly the same thing. Okay, so now we have both of those rail lines marked out. The next one is on the deck of the board, is this 30 millimeter mark on the deck. So we go all the way around the deck, knowing where we're going to stop that curve as we come up towards the deck. So you just basically set like that, 30 millimeters. So we're almost finished marking our guides. The one last guide I like to do now is so this line is the 95 millimeter from the deck, and you can see it starts to run out here. So now I like to just set the gauge from the bottom to that same line, like that, and then run that up into the nose. And this will just give us, yep, like that. This will just give us a better gauge to work from while we're taking the material out of the bottom here. Same deal, I'm not going to go all the way up into there, but what I want to do, because the next step we're going to be using the electric planer to remove a lot of this material. And so now we have these two marks here. We know that we can't go past this line. This is our hard edge of the bottom of the board. And this is the sort of apex of this curve, and we know that this was the apex of that secondary curve, meaning that we can run a flat line almost to this line, to that line, without affecting this curve, and then blend that over, so roll it over afterwards. And so as we're coming into the nose, we're going to be sort of hitting these two lines all the way along here, and then this is going to get a little bit smaller and smaller as we sort of run into the nose there. I do it with my eye, so I don't bother marking all of that out now, but you could probably calculate that and mark some different lines, but you'll see that as we start to do it, you can sort of tell if you're taking too much or not enough, and you've got to just blend that shape out essentially. Okay, so I'll mark that on the other side, and then we're ready to start taking some of this material out. Okay, so I'm ready to get started. The wind and waves just popped up, so I thought I'd better head out for a quick bash, but I'm back and we're ready to start planing these rails. So a couple of quick points before we get into it, just using the planer. First off, I like to pick my angle, so the angle that's going to meet the two lines, so I'm not sort of rolling the planer on all different angles while I'm planing. I set my angle that's going to hit those two lines, and then I keep it at exactly that the whole time. The second point is I like to count my strokes, so if I'm hitting this side with 5 times, then I go to the other side and I hit that with 5 times. I don't just work the whole side and then move and try and do the same thing on the other side. I count how much I'm taking off. If it's 10 strokes on this side, go 10 strokes on that side, then another 3 strokes on this side, another 3 strokes on that side. It makes it far more easier to keep all of this symmetrical. With the stringers, you want to make sure that we're running down the grain, so don't ever come up with the planer and hit into these stringers. It will blow that apart. It's going to be pretty hard anyway, even going down the grain, so you want to make sure that we're sort of going towards the nose at the nose and towards the tail at the tail. And the last thing is, we're not going all the way to the lines here. The foam is so easy to shape that we'll finish those curves off with the surf form and with the sanding block. So we're sort of just trying to take the bulk out of it with the hand plane, and then we'll sort of get back onto the hand tools. Okay, awesome. Let's get into it. Okay, so I've just been working the bottom of the rails, so a bit of a progress report. I've come pretty close to the lines here. You can see the line on the top of or on the bottom here, and the line that serves as the midpoint for the curve that reaches the actual middle of the rail there. So I brought it right close to that rail, to that line, until it starts to blend away based on sort of as we're talking about when we're drawing those lines. And so you can see what I've tried to do here is just keep this even, or more so just smooth, so it makes sense. So when you're siding along it, that rail is starting to make sense. It looks smooth and straight, and there's no weird bumps, and it also adheres to the outline that we drew. At the nose here, you can see I haven't taken any of this with the planer. Too risky to hit this with the planer, so we'll just take that off by hand. But I have brought the stringer really close to the line, and I'm a little bit off the line here, so I might just tidy that up with the planer. The tail, I've really tried to bring it right close to this outline, but I just leave it a little bit off there because I'll actually carve that down by hand in a moment. But that's really close now to being finished with the planer. One thing we can do is, knowing that this line was serve as the midpoint of this curve, we can actually run the planer now on its corner and just sort of take maybe 1 or 2 passes off that corner, and then that will basically be done, ready for hand shaping after that. And so then we can flip it over and we'll take a little bit off the corner of the deck as well. Okay. So now we've got two steps. We've got this flat section, then this one onto the flat side of the rail. So I've taken a few swipes out of that, a little less towards the nose again, but that's easy now to blend as we start to sand it and curve the underside of that rail. So the next step is we're going to move to our concaves. So we'll mark out the concave for the bottom first, and we'll plane some of this out, we'll rough it out, and then we can move to sanding and sort of blending everything over. Okay, let's do it. So for the concave, we don't want to touch the foil box area, so we're just taking it out of the front, and essentially what we're trying to achieve is a bit of a dish here that allows the board to sort of bounce up. This is something that I found, you know, just the single concave I found works really well. You can get pretty fancy. They do sort of these planing hulls to concave to double concaves and all of these types of things that you'll see in different foil boards. But for me, the single concave for foil boards is great. Single to double concave for a surfboard, it's you know, it's complex as it needs to be. So the way I do it is I pretty much just sketch it out. So I know that when the board, you know, we've got the rocker coming down here, and I know that if the board hits the water surface, I'm going to want it to sort of direct from about there and run down through there. And so I just sketch it with the pencil, and then we'll be sort of paying close attention to how much we're taking off with the planer. Similar to how we do the rails, one swipe here, one swipe there, one swipe there, one swipe here, 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 right? So you're not taking too much on either side. Now, because it's a foil board, we do have this box, and we don't want to build some weird curve here. And so we're pretty much just taking a dish, something like this, without touching that. So the majority of the material is going to come out of here, and we're going to sort of just blend from there to there, but because this is a curve, the majority, like I said, will come out of here, and we'll sort of make this almost like a straight line from there to there. And that's what basically helps with that planing. So as the board hits, it's a straight line instead of a curved line, which is better for bouncing and better for takeoff, and better for directing the flow of water right through the center of the board and out through the tail. Okay, so I'll just show you what I've done here. Hopefully you can see that underneath the ruler, that light. If I hold it up. So you can see it's reasonably subtle, but there is a concave in the middle there. And most of the material has been taken out of about here, and absolutely nothing here, so I'm keeping that flat. Now, you could run the concave all the way back, but the risk is that you make the foil box mounting area sort of not very flat. So I kind of prefer to just leave that. I think any advantage that you're going to get from having your concave running through there is going to be offset by the risk of making a mistake and having sort of an off-kilter foil connection. So I just run this single concave exactly like I've shown you, and now we can flip over and we'll do the deck. I'm just going to be taking just a couple of runs out of the center here and just sinking that in slightly, but not much at all. So very similar to what we just did on the other side. I'm just going to kind of be just sketch yourself an area where you think, okay, how do I want this to sort of look? And I think it's going to be sort of like this. This is where we're going to be standing. You can sort of think about this like, where is my traction pad going to go? Right? So it's like that. And then we're just going to do exactly the same process now and just sort of take a couple of millimeters out of the center, and then we can clean it up with the sander. Okay, so we've just got a couple of millimeters underneath that ruler, if you can see any light through there. It does add a little bit aesthetically. It looks quite nice. Might not be able to pick that up in the camera, but it does look good. So that's all I'll be taking, just adding that slightly sunken deck there. The next step is to start sanding and rounding our rails. So a couple of tips for sanding, particularly on the rails, is similar to the way that we were doing the planing. We don't want to just start rounding at one point and try and blend the rest of it. So we're sort of sanding these high points off, so sort of taking these corners off but not completely rolling them down yet. So as I'm sort of sanding this down, this high to the next high to the next high to the next high, you still leave somewhat of a hard edge, and it gives you that reference guide so that you know that you're sort of sanding that rail all evenly along the rail. If you just roll this edge and then come and sand down here and then sand a little bit more here, as soon as you blend that, you can't tell what you're up to and how much you've taken off. So you're sort of still maintaining that slight hard edge all the way to the very final sand. The bottom, if I flip the board over, we actually want to keep that hard edge. So we'll be sanding, sort of always keeping that angle so that we can have this hard edge for water release when we're fiberglassing it. So same deal though, I'll be taking a little bit off this side, a little bit off that side, working my way around the board, slowly rolling this down, slowly blending all of this together, slowly taking some of this around the corner, bit on that side, bit on that side, working all the way around the board methodically. But like I said, just trying not to blend anything completely until the final sand, because otherwise you start to lose track of what you're doing. In the center, I'm just going to be same thing, just starting to sand all this now. I'm going to be using my big sanding block and then moving to different sanding blocks and different grits. And if there's anything that like really needs a lot of work, I might take the surf form out, but really in this EPS you're better off just sticking with that sanding block and sort of spending more time with it, but you end up with a smoother finish. If I use the surf form at this stage of the game, it tears out a lot and then, you know, there's no recovering from it. So let's do it. Okay, so I've done a lot of the rough sanding now, and I just wanted to talk about, you know, this seems like a lot of talking about sanding, but this is kind of like the actual final shaping of it, so it is quite important. So when I'm sanding these rails, I've used the sander on the flat angle that I used the planer on, and then I've used the sander on this one, just taking that high off, and then I've used the sander on this angle, taking that high off, and now you can kind of see there's a ridge there, and there's a ridge there, and there's a ridge there, and there's a ridge there. And so then you can use the sander to sort of blend that ridge, that ridge, that ridge, and then finally this ridge. But because we've kept these hard edges here, it gives you, you can see that this is either parallel or it's not parallel, or you know, you're tapering up there. But this is what I was trying to say before, where you don't want to blend that immediately because you'll start to lose track of what you're doing. And so I've done that all the way around on the deck. I've also done the bottom, but the bottom I've actually started to I've already started to blend this. You can see I've taken more of those highs off, but I've left the hard edge on the bottom itself and also on the rail. But this is getting really close now to being able to blend this around and start to smooth it out. We want to keep the hard edge on the bottom, but we do actually want to blend more out of here. So we don't need a hard edge right up at the nose. So I'm going to start to soften that slightly into the nose and then keep it reasonably hard going into the tail here. So yeah, so it's pretty much time to start fine sanding. One other thing is, I did use the planer just to take more out of these stringers. It was just a bit too much work with it, you know, if I wanted to sand this down. So I've basically planed this down now so that this curve can continue all the way around to the tail. And so I'll keep working on that note on the tail as well. Okay. All right, and that is it for shaping. So we've done all the final sanding now. Overall, things are looking pretty good. I've softened all of the edges. We've got, you know, everything blended together. It all feels nice. It looks good. I think the garbage foam definitely added an extra element where we're seeing a little more tear out. You can see these sorts of holes and things like that. So lots of imperfections like that in this blank, but I'm willing to look past that for the use of the recycling that foam. So that's, you know, that's worth it. But everything's feeling blended and looking good. A great shell now for the fiberglass, so I'm happy with that. So in the next video, we're going to move on to doing the foil track box and then also fitting those two foil tracks. And you know, there was a lot of information in this video, so if you've got questions, just put them in the comments. I'm happy to answer the best I can. And if you're a shaper, if you've been making foil boards yourself, also put that in the comments. So there's other people that might read those comments and find them helpful. So if you've got any insights and things that you like to do as well, I'd love to hear it as well. So yeah, like I said, hopefully that was a helpful video, guys, and we'll see you in the next one.